Number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to section 1.
You will hear a lecture on deep-sea exploration.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4.
Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Good evening. My talk this evening will cover 3 main themes. First, I'll outline a timeline of how deep-sea exploration vessels developed. Secondly, I'll describe the most recent of these, the Deep-Sea Challenger. And finally, I'll look at some of the benefits of this deep-sea research. OK, to start with, let's look at how underwater exploration vehicles have developed over the years. The first manned deep-sea exploration vessel was invented in the 1920s. It was called a bathysphere, better known as a diving bell. It was basically a round metal structure with windows with just enough room for 2 men to sit in. And it was lowered into the ocean on a cable. The first descent in the diving bell took place in 1930, and in 1934 it went down to a depth of nearly 1,000 metres, which was impressive for the time. The problem with the diving bell was that it had no power of its own, and there wasn't much room for the researchers to move around. So, the next development after the diving bell was the bathyscaphe, a small manned submarine invented in the 1940s. The difference between the two was that the bathyscaphe had its own power source, which allowed the scientists to investigate in the depths of the ocean more freely. A bathyscaphe called the Trieste reached a record depth of 10,000 metres in 1960. Since then, a new record has been set by James Cameron, who descended to a depth of 11,000 metres for the first time in 2012.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
So let's move on now to look at the submarine that took James Cameron so far down into the ocean. If you look at the drawing of the Challenger, you can see the pilot's chamber at the very bottom of the submarine. It's a very small section where the pilot sits and controls the sub and all the equipment on it. Now let's have a look at how the submarine is powered. Going up from the pilot's chamber, in the middle of the sub, on the right-hand side of the drawing, you can see a whole section covered in batteries. They provide the power source that takes the sub all the way to the bottom of the ocean and back up to the surface again. Next to that, there's another important part of the sub. You probably realise that there's no light at the bottom of the ocean, so the sub needs to take its own. If you look at the back of the sub, in the middle, just next to the batteries, you can see the panel of lights. They provide the light for filming and taking samples from the seabed. And one more part of the sub, which is important for navigation and to stop it spinning out of control, is the large fin at the back. You can see it at the back of the sub at the top of the drawing. OK, to conclude my talk, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. First, what is the purpose of this deep-sea exploration? And second, is it worth the expense? I think one of the justifications for spending so much money on this kind of research is that it allows scientists to understand more about the surface of the Earth. For example, how it was formed and how it behaves. This could have important consequences for predicting earthquakes and saving lives through early warning systems. Another reason this type of research is considered valuable is that by exploring unknown parts of the ocean, we increase our knowledge of the availability of minerals for industry. And obviously, this could lead to huge commercial advantages. So, the answer is yes. In the long run, this kind of exploration can benefit both the ordinary population and industry.
That is the end of Section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Listen to a university teacher giving a lecture about emblematic buildings.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Right. Today we're going to consider emblematic buildings. That is, buildings which are closely associated with the city where they're situated, and which almost represent the city to the outside world. You know, if you think of Athens, you think of the Acropolis and the Parthenon. Or for Sydney, you think of its Opera House. Recently, a lot of other cities around the world have been following the example of Sydney and putting up emblematic buildings. Bilbao, for example, in northern Spain, opened its own Guggenheim Museum in 1999. This houses an important collection of modern art and attracts 1 million visitors to the city every year. In other cities, modern additions to existing buildings have proved a tremendous attraction, as is the case of the glass pyramid in front of the Louvre in Paris, a museum which gets about 5 million visits a year. This is only surpassed by Paris's other emblematic building, the Eiffel Tower, with 6 million. Projects of this type can make a big difference to a city. Let's take the example of Valencia, a city in eastern Spain. Relatively few people used to visit Valencia some years ago. In 1992, it received only 75,000 tourists. However, its city authorities embarked on an extremely ambitious project to create a city of arts and sciences. And when it opened in 2001, its futuristic science museum received no less than 4 million visitors in the first year. The effect of these buildings is tremendous, and even cities in relatively poor countries are doing the same thing. Just look at the new library in Alexandria in Egypt as an example.
Dangers.
Before you hear the rest of the programme, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
These emblematic buildings bring many more visitors to their cities, but that's only one of a number of benefits that arise. In Valencia, the City of Arts and Sciences breathed new life into a depressed industrial area of the town, and this has now become a prime residential zone, as well as a tourist attraction. The effort and vision which goes into completing a project like this also has the effect of enhancing the city's image. Previously, if people thought about Valencia at all, it was seen as a provincial backwater, whereas now it sticks in people's minds. Valencia's progressive and energetic. The City of Arts and Sciences has put Valencia on the international map, and that brings in plenty of new investment from outside, as people realize what excellent business opportunities the city offers. Nowadays, the competition among cities to attract attention from tourists, politicians, and business people is fierce. And in Valencia, they realized that it's not sufficient to have just one emblematic building which will serve for a single short visit. For this reason, they've built an entire complex of buildings. Looking at the next slide, which shows a plan of the City of Arts and Sciences, you'll see what I mean. You park your car in a building which, amazingly, has a garden with palm trees and sculpture on its roof. You go down some steps, and in front of you, you're faced with the colossal Science Museum, with its huge white arches. This, and the combined planetarium and large-screen film theater nearby, are surrounded by artificial lakes, and from a distance, they appear to be floating on water. The effect is magical, as the whole complex is built in shining white concrete which reflects in the water. Further along, beyond the planetarium, is the new opera house and theater complex, which from a distance looks like a vast ship. In the opposite direction, they've built the equally breathtaking Oceanographic Park, which is the largest in Europe and features, amongst other things, an underwater restaurant.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Section 3.
You are going to hear an introduction to the facilities and regulations of the main university library. You will hear 3 different speakers describe different aspects of the library.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hello, my name's John Giles. It's good to see you all here for this part of your orientation to the university. Libraries can be complicated and frightening places for new students, and my job's to make you feel welcome, show you how you can find your way around, and introduce you to people who can give you further information and advice about using the library. I'll give you a general introduction to the printed materials. Then Susie, who you will meet in a few minutes, will talk about our multimedia services. And finally, Jonathan Freeland, our head librarian, will outline the rules and regulations you must observe as library users. First, though, on behalf of my colleagues and myself, I want you to know that we are all at your service. Unlike many libraries, we insist that all our librarians have an additional qualification in at least one of the subjects taught in the university. You will find librarians who are specialists in science, social sciences, and humanities. Most of our staff are also currently doing research and thus up to date with the periodical and internet literature, as well as the books. The second advantage we enjoy here is that all our books and periodicals are available from this building. Some of them have to be ordered from our underground stores, known as the stacks. But you don't have to visit more than one building to find the materials you need. This is because we are purpose-built. Now, how do you find your way around? As you no doubt saw in the entrance hall, there is a plan of the library showing you where the books and periodicals can be found for any particular subject. We keep the books and periodicals for each subject on the same floor, so for instance, environmental sciences are colour-coded green and are housed on the ground floor towards the front. Geography is colour-coded brown and can be found on the ground floor towards the back of the building. Each room is organised on the same plan. Reference books, which cannot be taken out of the library, are found at the far end of each room, near the librarian's desk, or station as we call it. Next to them, on the right, are periodicals for the last 2 years. The rest of the shelves contain general books on the subject. These can be borrowed. Lastly, the domestic arrangements. Seating.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
The library is of 2 kinds: rectangular tables for up to 6 people and individual study booths known as carols. No, not Christmas carols. At every seat there is a PowerPoint for a laptop computer. There is also a panel which lights up to tell you when a book you have ordered is ready for collection from the librarian's desk. After all that hard work, you'll be ready for something to eat. And there are slot machines on every floor where you can buy food and drink. In the basement is a cafeteria where you can order fast food such as pizza, hamburgers, and also fish and chips, salad and fruit. You mustn't bring food and drink into the reading rooms though. Here's Susie Wallace to tell you about the high-tech facilities of the library.
Thanks, John. Don't worry, this isn't going to require a degree in systems engineering to get the hang of. Anyway, with computers and audio systems, the best way to learn is by doing. But here's a few tips to get you started. If there's anything else you want to know, each piece of equipment has a manual explaining how to use it, and either I or Elaine, my very capable assistant, will be on hand to get you sorted out. First off, I'd like you all to follow me over to the Multimedia Centre. You have to come through this room to get to it in any case. Then gather round and I'll talk about each piece of equipment as we get to it. Right, here we are. Now, the Multimedia Centre, or MMC for short, houses all the computer facilities you'll need for your degree studies and your language learning. Many of you are studying electronics or similar subjects. We have terrific facilities for learning CAD, computer-aided design, for you non-technies. Some leading companies have donated equipment and state-of-the-art software packages. That's a spin-off from our thriving Industry Links programme. Many of you will be going on for your job experience. But to get back to the point, we have 44 PC terminals and 6 Macs. The Macs are loaded with fantastic software for you, art and design and textile design students. Over here, you can see our 2 widescreen TV monitors. They can receive broadcasts in most Asian and European languages, as well as English. For English language news, we encourage you to use the Student Union TV room, so that those who are learning other languages can use these. Some useful broadcasts come at awkward times, so if you get a note from your academic advisor on a form we'll give you, we can tape up to 2 hours a week for you. In a moment, I leave you to explore on your own, but here's our head librarian to say a brief word about library regulations.
Good morning. I'm sorry to sound like a police officer, but there are a few rules we all need to observe for the benefit of everybody. Courtesy to staff and other library users comes high up the list. Second, the security and safekeeping of materials is essential. All library items are electronically tagged. If the beeper goes off as you leave, you must return to the checkout desk. You are not allowed to bring any bags, packages, or outdoor clothing into the reading rooms. You must leave them in the lockers outside in the corridor. You must take reasonable care of library materials while they are in your possession and return them within 2 weeks of borrowing them. Failure to return them on time without a good reason will result in a fine. When you register to join the library, you will get a copy of the full rules and you must sign this to say that you obey them.
That is the end of Section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Thanks for turning up today and welcome to this short talk on student loans. What you'll hear from me today are a few starting points, which should guide you in the right direction for what is suited for you. I'm assuming that most of you have an account at a bank or building society that you can draw funds from. These funds will either be your own or through a loan you may have with the bank. You may even have a credit card you can use. If you don't have a bank account, I suggest you open one with one of the major banks. It's the best option as you will find major banks have more outlets. Within the city and in close proximity to the university are HSBC in City Plaza, Barclays in Ragdale Square, National Westminster in Preston Park, and Halifax in Hope Street. At this stage, I just want to inform international students that not all the services available for resident students will be available to you. As international students, you need to provide documentation stating that you have funds available to see you through the duration of your study. Different banks have different policies, so search out the one that will benefit you the most. You will also need to provide a photocopy of your passport and certification of your enrolment in the university. The most common way of taking out a student loan is either through the university or through a banking institution. If you decide to go with the university, again, you need to supply a certification of enrolment and passport if you're an international student, or if you're a resident, you will only need the enrolment details. One word of warning is that you need to be clear on the interest you will be paying on your loan. The interest level through some universities is almost as much as the loan itself, so if you borrow £10,000, you might have to pay back close to 20. Also, with student loans through the university, you have a limited time to pay them back, and this time is not flexible. You might have only 1 year. You might have 5. As I said, different universities have different policies. This university, for example, has an interest rate of 23.5%. It's quite high, but not as high as many of the other larger universities. The other option is to take out a loan through your bank. You will find that most banks will have lower interest rates than the university. They average roughly between 14.5 to 18.5%. Banks also give you an option of over how many years you want to make repayments. You can basically choose to pay it back in a year or in 10, even more if you are finding it difficult. Make sure you have an account with the bank you decide to go with. Either a current account or a savings account is enough. With either of these accounts, you can use your card to make withdrawals and deposits from automatic teller machines at any time, and make payments over the internet if you choose. You can also use Maestro, one of the systems which automatically take the money from your account at a time that you have specifically stated, and deposits it into a nominated account of your choice. You might decide to have £150 taken out each month, and each month this is what will happen. Also, check what fees apply with what services. Some services are free of charge, but they are few and far between. OK, so that's all from me. If there are any questions related to what I've covered today, please raise your hand.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.